Fifth chapter of Bava Metzia deals with interest. That is lending at interest. Really interesting that sorry to use the word interesting. We can remark on the fact that the fourth chapter, the one that we've just completed, is about fraud and overcharging. So that leads naturally into the fifth chapter about lending at interest, because lending at interest, at least to Jews, is forbidden. We can't do that. In other words, it's equivalent to fraud and overcharging. So we're moving in the way of the Mishnah, we move gradually from topic to topic, but each topic is always or almost always linked in some way to the topic before. That's how the Mishnah goes. Remember, originally it was not written down. It was recited off by heart. So perhaps it's not surprising that there's always a let's say a mental hook from chapter to chapter. So we're going to move now from overcharging into lending at interest, which is another form of overcharging. And because this is a completely new topic, we're going to need some more verses, some more psukim. And we're going to begin in Vayikra, in the Parsha, I think of Kedoshim actually, or Kedoshim, or maybe, yeah, I think Kedoshim. But we'll move into Mishpatim. Let's begin in Vayikra. If your brother grows poor. Now, lending in the life of the Mishnah and the Tanakh is a form of charity. It's something you do for people who are poor, who can't afford, who can't sustain themselves. So already the borrower is someone who's disadvantaged. So the Torah goes on to say, so you've got this person who's poor. Achicha, he's your brother. Al tikach me'ito neshech. You don't take from him neshech. Neshech is, well, the root is nashach, to bite, but we'll see this is interest. So you don't take neshech. Vitarbit. You don't take tarbit. Tarbit is from the root of rabbah. So resh beit hey, like bereshit rabbah. Tarbit is something to do with increase. So you don't take interest and you don't take increase, v'yareta melohecha, and you fear your God. And in the next verse, the prohibition is repeated. Et kaspecha lo titen lo b'neshech. You shall not give him your money on interest. Uvemarmit lo titen ochlecha. And you shouldn't lend him something to eat for increase. So somehow money seems to be associated with neshech, interest, and produce seems to be associated with increase, with tarabit. But they appear in parallel. Neshech and tarabit seem to occur, if you like, they seem to be joined to one another in the Pesukim. And we'll see this come out, by the way, in the Mishnah. How does neshech relate to tarbit? But clearly they're both forbidden. Let's carry on. Let's just look at one more pasuk and then we'll jump into the Mishnah. And this is famous from Mishpatim. In fact, it comes up in the Torah read for Chol HaMoed Pesach. So Pesach is, of course, when we liberate ourselves from slavery and we were reminded to let go our own slaves. So maybe it's not coincidence that we're reminded about lending at interest. Im kesef talviet ami et he'ani imach. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, again, lending is something we do for poor people. Lo tieh lo kenoshe. Don't be an interest. Well, yeah. Don't be a noshe. Well, I've translated here as a biter. Don't tricky. Don't be an oppressor anyway. Lo simun alav neshech. Don't take interest from him. There's another prohibition on interest. And Rashi comments here, just to bring us up to date. Neshech, that means rebit. He gives us essentially the rabbinic word for interest. The rabbinic word for interest is rebit, by the way, which sound also from the root rabbah, rav. So neshech is ribit. That's what it means. And then famous comment that it's like the bite of a snake. It starts off with something you hardly feel, and then it swells right up to the top of his head. And then he says, kach ribit, just interest is just like that. You don't feel it at the beginning. And then it grows and grows and grows, and suddenly you lose mamon harbe. Eventually, the person loses a big fortune. So that's neshech. That's neshech in Torah and in Rashi. Rashi is quoting the Tanchuma there. So with these two words, neshech and tarbit, it's natural perhaps that the Mishnah should begin by asking, Ezehu neshech ve'ezehu tarbit. What is neshech? What is interest? And what is increased tarbit? How do we tell the difference? And we'll see they're both forbidden, but the Mishnah still wants to understand the difference. And it gives a couple of examples. We'll flesh these out in more detail in later Mishnayot, but perhaps these two examples, and we'll close with these examples, just gives us a sense as to where the Mishnah is going to come from. Let's start with neshech. Ezehu neshech. What is neshech? Hamalveh sela b'chamisha dinarim. Someone lends a seller for 5 dinars. Now, a seller is 4 dinars. We know that. We know that. We know a seller is 4 dinars. He lends 4 dinars for 5, i.e. he says, look, I'll lend you 4 sellers today, but you're going to repay me 5 when you repay. And we can do this in produce as well as in money. Sataim chitim b'shalosh. I'm going to give you 2 seahs of wheat for 3, i.e. I'll give you 2 seahs of wheat today, but when you pay me back 3. And why is that called neshech? The Mishnah concludes mipnei shehu noshech, because he bites. It's biting. A loan is supposed to be something that we extend to someone in our community to help him out. It's not supposed to be profit making. If you make a profit out of a loan, you're like a biter. And of course, we get a sense. I mean, obviously it's a play on words, right? Neshech and noshech, interest and biting. But you get a sense as to how the Mishnah feels about this prohibition. Because, I mean, what kind of person bites? I mean, it's a 3-year-old bites, or a mad person bites. A normal person doesn't bite another person. So that's neshech. Let's keep going. Ezehu tarbit. What is increase? So that's the other word we saw in Vayikra, in Leviticus. What's tarbit? And this example is going to be a little bit more complicated, but we'll see, by the way, a lot of financial engineering, a lot of, let's say, tricky dealing going through this chapter. So it's important just to look at one of these examples, and we'll see the kind of issues that the Mishnah is going to address in the remainder of the chapter. Ezehu tarbit. What is increased? Hamarbe va perot. Someone who increases produce. Well, we don't quite know what that means, but let's keep going and let's have faith and go on in the Mishnah. Kate Sud, how does it work? I.e., can you give me an example? So now let's have the example. Someone bought wheat at a golden dinar for a kur. A golden dinar, by the way, is 25 silver dinars. So he bought wheat at 25 dinars for a kur. V'chein hashar, and that was the price. So he bought it at the market price. What happened? Amdu chitim b'shloshim dinar. The market price rose to 30 dinars. So he's got a forward contract here. He's actually bought the wheat for 25. He's basically paid spot for a forward delivery. He's paid 25 for wheat, his counterparty still owes him the wheat. The wheat's not been delivered yet. And now the price of wheat has risen to 30. So what are we going to do? Of course, he wants his wheat, right? Because he wants to capitalize on the gain. So what does he do? He says, Amarlo, ten li chitai. Give me my wheat. I want my wheat. She'ani mochran velokach ani li bahen yain. Because give me my wheat, because I'm going to sell it. I'm going to buy wine with the proceeds. Wheat's gone up. Wine seems to be stable. I'm going to sell wheat and buy wine. And that's a normal commercial transaction. Anybody can do that. But here's the twist. Amarlo, v'harei chitecha asuyot alai bishloshim dinar. Here, your wheat is going to be asuyot alai. It's going to be reckoned with me. In other words, I recognize I've got your wheat. And I'm bishloshim dinar. I value that wheat at shloshim dinar. I recognize that I owe you now 30 dinars worth of wheat. By the way, we're accounting this debt now in money, not in wheat. But let's go on. V'harei lach etzli bahen yain. And you've got a claim on me for wine. In other words, look, I know that you want the wheat and you're going to buy wine with it. Let's just settle net. Let's just say you got a claim on me for wine. You got a claim on me for wine. And what is it? What's the key factor? V'yain ein lo. He's got no wine. This guy who owes him the wheat doesn't have wine. He's anticipating going out in the market and buying in the wine to deliver. In other words, rather than delivering wheat, he's going to deliver wine. And he's going to make a gain from the fact that the price of wheat has gone up. But let's think about it a second. From the point of view of the buyer, well, it's pretty straightforward. He's going to get wine rather than wheat. But from the point of view of the seller, what is this guy doing? Well, it feels a bit like this guy's a commodity trader, because he's happy to either deliver the wheat or to deliver the wine. He's a trader. And how does he trade? Well, he's holding the 25 silver dinars. He was paid up front. He was paid up front for the wheat. And it feels as if we're giving this guy some capital to trade with. And in return for that capital, we're going to get back the increased value of the wheat, and we're actually going to get it back in wine. It feels a bit like we're financing a commodity trader here. That's the answer to the question. Ezehu tarabit, what is increase? Hamarbe baperot, someone increasing produce. We can't, if we're lending someone money to finance his trading operation, and he ends up paying us back more than he originally borrowed from us, that feels a bit like lending at interest, and that is forbidden. Just as much as if he just said, look, I'll give you 25 dinars and you give me back 30 when you repay me.